We're back for another exciting conversation. This time we have a guest who has been experimenting within the bioenergetic paradigm, but also delving into other paradigms like the bodybuilding, subculture, keto, carnivore. Josh Rayner is our guest. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing good, David. How are you?
Great, great to have you. Great to have you on. Uh, so I wanted to kind of explore with you how you have applied the bioenergetics paradigm to your life. Are you someone who subscribes to the overall philosophy behind some of these ideas, and do you attach it to religion, philosophy, things of that nature, or do you keep it solely for a kind of nutrition paradigm?
Well, I mean, I definitely see how everything's connected, and I never kind of prevent myself from exploring all the implications of any of these different approaches.
Yeah.
I would say that what draws me to any of these interventions that I've tried is a general idea behind it because it has to make sense to me. But all these different things tend to make sense from a different perspective and framework. And so I'm very willing to sort of take on the greater structure of the framework in order to apply and understand it. And then usually through self experimentation, I kind of extract the value from it and kind of go from there.
Right. So you have a background that was kind of not in this space, but you've gotten to the bioenergetic paradigm through a lot of experimentation. Tell us a little bit about your journey there.
Well, I've been a fitness minded person my whole life, was a lifelong athlete, and always really took to the training and nutrition aspect of it. So, when I was playing high school football, I was in the weight room and I was one of the strongest guys, one of the most dedicated in the weight room. And I started taking protein shakes and kind of all that thing. And my nutrition was mostly around performance. Just trying to put on weight in that sense.
Did you
But
do
then
the
in
old
in
school 80s style stuff where you put 50 raw egg yolks in a blender with tuna and orange juice?
I haven't done anything that gross, but I've certainly tried quite a bit of things. Um, but I got influenced by paleo early on. I was in college, and around 2010, 2011, my perspective shifted more towards paleo than the traditional bodybuilding stuff that I had been doing, like, just your oatmeal and protein shakes and chicken breast and rice and broccoli kind of a thing. Um, and that gave me a lot of influence of the quality of food, which I'm really grateful for. Unfortunately, it kind of put me in this like keto framework without understanding it at all. And I was sort of stupidly trying to do keto without doing it at all. So, I wouldn't eat a carrot because it had too many carbs, but because I was in college, I would still drink like 10 beers. Um, so, not exactly the most well thought out thing, but at least that kind of started the gears turning in my head.
Were you eating jars of mayonnaise or anything disgusting? Like, were you eating a lot of poofa?
No, I mean, I definitely like my one of my I was in CrossFit for a while. That's how I heard of paleo. And one of my coaches would eat an entire jar of nut butter like every day. And what's actually funny is this guy tried to sell me on paleo being, paleo keto just being the most powerful thing in the world. And he was like, you just don't eat carbs and you can eat everything else and you basically have like superpowers. But I actually did like I listened to what he said after the fact and looking back on it and realized this guy was eating a whole jar of nut butter every day, which is still like 150 grams of carbs, which is, you eat a whole large pizza. Um, so, it's funny, like when you come from low carb circles, in a way, it's like veganism, or maybe more vegetarianism, where someone will call themselves a vegetarian, but if they still think they're a vegetarian, even though the cheating on the diet is probably solving all of the issues that you would get. So you're keto, but you binge on the weekends, so you're not having the same metabolic destruction kind of a thing. So what people say they're doing, what they actually do is not always the same thing.
So the binging part is sometimes the healthiest part of these diets, you think, huh?
Yeah, I don't know if I definitely have a tweet in my drafts. I don't know if I've ever sent it, but it was like something about the a lot of the people who get the most benefit from the most restrictive diets do so because of their lack of adherence to it, which I think kind of actually does lend people towards this more flexible, like what they used, what I was familiar with described as metabolic flexibility. Your body should be able to use carbs for fuel, use fat for fuel. And what's interesting is because I had this strong paleo influence, I noticed that I wasn't getting the performance benefits. And so I went to a paleo inspired bodybuilding diet. So it was high carb, but I was looking for low inflammatory carbs. So getting my starches from white rice, potatoes, oatmeal, and then an emphasis on grass fed meats and eggs and full fat dairy. And that was the first time that I actually started to feel like I was getting results from my diet. And I instinctually did this thing where I would eat my normal high carb diet on my training days,
Hmm.
and on my rest days I would eat keto. And that was when I was, maintaining a general level of leanness. I was training really hard, and that actually worked pretty well. But in my head, it's funny, I wasn't cheating on my diet because I understood that carbs were necessary, but I still had this idea in my head that carbs were still bad and carbs had to be offset by training. Like if you don't train, the carbs are bad for you.
Mm.
And that's where that kind of situation came up where I wouldn't eat them on my rest days.
Now there was another thing. I did low carb. I started doing that around 2003, 2004, and I did the stupid kind of low carb in that way, like, what everybody, what they do, the bacon and I didn't eat a lot of that, but
Oh yeah.
you
I ate so much bacon.
and you get the chicken wings, you go for those BOGO deals for wings, and that's like, I used to say that's like my dessert was like going to like a good wing place when they had a lot of wing deals. And I don't eat a lot of them, but I did enjoy them with the ranch dressing or the blue cheese, sauce. And we didn't understand the dangers of omega 6 as much back then, 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, you just didn't talk about that. It wasn't, there was stuff on there. I remember like vaguely reading some sites about omega 6 to omega 3 ratios. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's too complicated. I'm like, I'm already sacrificing carbs. I'm not going to deal with that. I just like blocked that idea out of my mind when I saw it like, I don't know, 2006, 7. I don't know what it was, but um, I just didn't want to even entertain more because I really, my nature is, more on the Trump side of personality type where it's like I don't want to have that fixation of measuring and counting calories and secluding this thing. And I felt like the carb thing was very, if I got to pick one thing, this thing works. I was losing weight on it and did great as long as I stayed on it. And it, it was one of those things where I never really noticed back then, when in my 20s, early 20s and stuff, that it did an effect on working out. And I was a workout addict. I would go 7 days a week and I do cardio and weightlifting and I just did it all. And I did ketogenic
And so
dieting.
you didn't feel any lack of performance without the
No,
carbs?
no, I was just freaking nuts. I just was, I don't know what was my personality or willpower or whatever, but I like to do a lot of stairs and I did a lot of stair running and I did the stair machine. I did a lot of weightlifting. I didn't do anything like in any kind of like serious, powerlifting or anything like that. But I did the fundamentals, the deadlifts, the squats. But I don't know about, I don't know what the first inkling that maybe this thing wasn't working, but I just noticed that over time, It felt like I had to stay in keto prison to try to have a decent, uh, in terms of not being overweight. I had to stay in that I felt like I was in keto prison, and I resented that, right? Because I was like, why is it that some other people get to eat carbs and they're just naturally lean? I guess this is just what they always say. Some people burn on fat genetically, and some people burn sugar. I don't know, but I felt like I always had to stay in it. But I noticed that over the years, and I would take breaks too, especially back in the day before Red Lobster got pillaged by all those sharks. Back in the day, they used to make good Cheddar Bay biscuits, and your grandma would take you out on a Sunday. Let's go out to Red Lobster. And I'd be like, Grandma, I'm trying to do low carb, But then when that big basket hit, you smell the cheese and the garlic. And they used to not stinge back on. They used to make it with love and care. That was before the hedge funds managers got a hold of that and just pillaged that lobster for every piece of its goodness. But it was actually founded nearby where I used to live in Polk County. And so I would, that was where the first Red Lobster was. So Grandma would take us out to Red Lobster. And, I'd be like, I'm doing low carb. Where's the lobster? I was a young 20-year-old, I'm like, oh man, I'm going to get me lobster. And then Grandma, she's like, okay, is that what you want? And then comes that big basket of those biscuits. And I was like, and I used to have such willpower, dude. I would literally, and I got into a philosophy. It's probably some kind of a eating disorder. I didn't know, but I would be like, I'm just enjoying the smell, Grandma. I'm getting pleasure from the smell
Oh,
alone. That's all I need.
that's masochistic, man.
Yeah, that's all I need is give me where's
Yeah.
that lobster, and then they'd bring me that stupid little lobster. And over the years, that lobster got smaller and smaller and less tasty, and it became a problem, And then but anyways, going back to that biscuit, sometimes I'd say, oh, if I just taste it, but don't swallow, that's stupid, right? I was so obsessed with keeping these carbs, had to get under 20 carbs or less was all I could do. But of course, when that salad came, they'd bring you the Caesar salad. That damn thing was loaded with soybean oil dressing. I didn't,
Oh yeah.
nobody knew about that. I mean, you'd have to be, who the hell knew about Ray Peat, or those types of conversations. And anytime you heard about high carb, it usually was the vegetarian coded stuff. And it always felt like men are meant to eat meat and women like to eat tons of fruit. That was just the way it's coded. It still is that way. I mean, it still feels like men eat meat, women like fruits and granola, And so, and that kind of culture and everything, and even how it feels. But yeah, I don't know where I was going on with that, but just kind of giving you background where I was.
Well, the omega 3, omega 6 thing, I remember well before I knew who Ray Peat was. That was a discussion in all the paleo circles that I was in,
Yeah.
where that's where taking all the fish oil came in, right?
Yeah.
Because omega 6 is bad, but they were saying omega 3
But
was
when did
good. You want to
paleo and
maintain that
primal come
ratio.
around? When did that come around? That was around two.
Paleo started to take off in like the late 2000s.
Yeah.
I
See,
got into it. I got into it in 2010.
yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
I
I mean,
was
yeah.
reading I
Marx,
was reading Rob. No,
you
well,
like
yeah, I
Marx?
read Mark Sisson, but I was more of a Rob Wolf guy.
Yeah.
And what's funny is that my Google Chrome has an extension that tracks how much time you spend on any individual website.
Yeah.
And I haven't opened Rob Wolf's website in like a decade. But he's still like in the top 10 of websites I've spent the most time on because I would listen to his podcast, read every single one of his blogs. I really consumed all of his material.
Yeah.
And so he mentioned Charles Poliquin, if you've ever heard of him.
Mhm.
Remember, everything I was doing was all centered around fitness. So nutrition didn't
Did you
have
play a sport or
any.
something?
Yeah, in high school, I was a three-sport athlete. I played basketball, football, and lacrosse.
How tall are you?
I'm 6 feet tall.
Okay. I, you know, I, I'm
Now,
a I'm a wrestling manager, so I'm always looking for people that want to get into the business of pro
oh,
wrestling.
I,
So,
I have a wrestler's build from playing football, and then I competed in strongman in my 20s.
so there you go.
Yeah.
This could be the day
Um,
you start a pro wrestling career.
Maybe I need a manager, I guess, man.
You got to have a
Um,
manager. You know, these people don't have managers these days, and some of them they have the mic skills of a dead rat. You know, there's
yeah.
just nothing. You know, and then so many of the people in the business today are world heavyweight champion and they're 5'2", eyes of blue. You can't do that. 5'2". I mean, I'm 6'5". So when I manage
Oh, you're
somebody
a
who's
big guy.
5'2" as my wrestler,
Yeah.
it doesn't look good visually on TV. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. You are like you're like the Big Show or something.
right,
And yeah, if the Big Show was managing like Rey Mysterio,
yeah,
you kind of got like a
yeah,
weird dynamic there.
yeah. So I'm always looking
Um,
for tall people who want to break into the business with me. So keep that
hey,
in
well,
mind.
maybe we'll talk about that for
Yeah,
sure. It's funny. I just watched the McMahon documentary on Netflix. It was
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so anyways, I got into so for the paleo thing, it was all about I was drinking fish oil like you wouldn't believe. I would drink so much of it.
Oh, all that rancid. Was it rancid, or did you at least get it cold?
I think I was getting cold,
Yeah,
refrigerated, like those good brands.
yeah.
But that's just like what I was
I did
reading
that too.
about, and
Yeah.
so I tried
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I
Yeah,
moved into that paleo stuff too around the late 2000s, and that seemed like the best of the best. It felt like it was cleaning up stupid low carb, cleaning it up a bit, you know what I mean? And getting
yeah,
it
because there was such an
smarter.
emphasis
Yeah,
on quality and like
yeah.
meat centric, and I mean, I grew up eating a lot of meat, and it I never even considered anything vegetarian because like not eating meat sounds ridiculous. It's like, well, people have to eat meat. You would never consider a diet that said don't eat meat. Which, like you're pointing to, a lot of the pro carb conversation is all from the vegetarian vegan side of things. But because I put such an emphasis on after like a year or two of kind of middling around with paleo, like haphazardly, um, I just kind of went into like the bodybuilding diet, but high quality, organic grass fed version of it. And that's kind of where I stayed for all about 5, 6, 7 years. And through that time, I fluctuated with some variation in approaches. I would um, do a little bit more carb or a little bit more starch and less fructose, and more fat and less fat. But it was usually through bulking and cutting phases more so than any like philosophical changes in diet
Hmm.
until around 2018, 2019. I had this strongman coach who was this very strange, very smart, kind of unusual guy who started having all of these unique perspectives on training and muscle groups and how you program things. And everything was connected back to the nervous system. And so he started talking about diet and nervous system and the enteric nervous system. And so the idea was you always eat for what is to come. In bodybuilding and fitness circles, you eat for what just happened. Like I just had a big workout. I'm going to go to all you can eat sushi now and replenish my glycogen stores. And his whole thing was you're signaling your nervous system for what you're trying to do next. And so through his perspective, you would basically eat either carbs or fat or even a mixture of the two during the day, depending on if you needed something that was um, if it was task oriented, you wanted carbs. It kind of put your mind in a very do this perspective. And if you wanted to be more creative, you would eat fats. And so he was a big fan of like drinking heavy cream when he wanted to write or expand his ideas. And then you would only eat your protein
Interesting.
when it was time to rest. So you would save all of your protein for nighttime when you would socialize and go to sleep. And the way that it made sense was if you were about to get into like a really aggressive fight or football game or a wrestling match, would you want to eat a big steak
Hmm.
or would you want to eat some fruit and some oatmeal, maybe a little bit of dairy, something that digests easily and gives you fuel
Hmm.
to do the next thing? And so that kind of changed my perspective for the first time in a long time. of a little bit more purpose of what I was eating. Um, and what's funny is that led me to eat something which very much resembled Peating without me knowing it. Now, I knew who Ray Peat was because when I was doing paleo, I was in this Facebook group. Like it was like the international paleo Facebook group. It had like thousands of members. And every once in a while, someone would bring up Ray Peat, and everyone's like, he's a quack, whatever. And so I heard the name, and I never paid any attention to what he advocated for. Just never looked into it because it didn't. Nothing that was said. No one said, "Oh, bioenergetic, the metabolism." It was just like he thinks you should like drink orange juice or something. I don't know. Um, so I naturally started eating tons and tons of carbs. And what I noticed was that I started to get leaner. The leanest I've ever been in my entire life was 2019. And I was eating 500, 600 grams of carbs a day, lots of sugar. I would drink like a whole big jug of orange juice during my training sessions. I would have oatmeal and berries for breakfast. I would go get an acai bowl after my training session. Um, and then I would go home and eat like a bunch of meat. And I think what happened is because that led me into carnivore. I think what happened was I wasn't eating the as nutritious foods as Ray would prescribe. Like, make sure you get some shellfish and oysters and liver, and get some milk and get some eggs, which give you a more rounded micronutrient profile. And I felt myself actually being over energized by such an effective metabolism through consuming so much carbs. It sort of had this inclination. I need to go keto all of a sudden. Like my brain said, I need to go keto. And I think it was my body telling me, hey, you are burning through all of our nutrient stores now. I'm going to change your cravings up to what ended up being carnivore. Um, and it's weird because it wasn't until carnivore that I actually tried something that was a true strict ketogenic diet, which only lasted for about 3 months, and then you run into those problems too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I did the carnivore thing on and off for a few years, and that's a hard one to stick to socially and so forth, you know. But
Yeah, well, it's one of the reasons why I think low carb and keto are so effective for so many people is that it's easy to follow
yeah,
in the sense that just don't eat carbs.
right,
And not only that, but eating out is much easier to do low carb than it is to do low fat
right.
because you can get meat. You can go to a fast food restaurant, go to the drive-through and get burger patties.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
can go to any breakfast place and get an omelet, bacon, meat, steak. You can go get chicken wings. When I was doing that thing where I was telling you where I would eat carbs on my training days and uh, eat like keto on my rest days,
Hmm.
every Sunday I would go with my buddies. We'd watch football all day long, and I would just eat like 50 wings all day, and that would be my like caloric intake. And in my head, it's going, "Oh, I'm like giving myself metabolic flexibility." Of course, not understanding the depths of there's oils and sauces, but um, yeah. So I still think there is a lot of value in something like carnivore, even from the peat perspective. I just think that it has to be used in the right circumstance. Otherwise, you cause a lot of problems.
What do you think of the right circumstances for carnivore?
You know, have you ever had Kyle Mamunis on your podcast?
Yeah, yeah. I've had him.
I think you
I
have,
had him
right?
back in 2019, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a big fan of Kyle. I've listened to just about everything I've ever been able to find that he's done,
Hmm.
and he had this like expression that was in a lot of the more conventional keto inspired health paradigms. You have to be healthy enough to eat carbs, and Kyle said you actually have to be healthy enough to be keto. you have to have a really healthy starting point in order to be keto because of how stressful it is for your system. Um, but I do think that for some people who might need to lose a lot of weight, it might be if they do keto slash carnivore with a huge emphasis on saturated fat to sort of limit the negative effects of like the circulating PUFA in the system. I think it might be one of the best ways to lose significant amounts of fat or to get someone who's holding so much weight to get into like a just a leaner body type.
Hmm.
Um, Without doing it for such an extended period of time that then your body starts to get all the negative effects. And what's interesting about that I found is, look, I was going like what I was saying from this super high carb diet and and very lean, you know, like 10% body fat. Um, Went carnivore and like was able to, because I had always weighed and measured all my food. You know, you were saying that that's not maybe the kind of person that you are. I always found that if I weighed and measured my food, then I had all the flexibility that I didn't feel like I was being deprived of anything. And so, and if I was really hungry, I was like, I'm going to eat more today and then I'll eat less tomorrow. And so I do think that there is some kind of balance there. But look, a healthy person, a truly healthy person, should not have to think about food that way. Um, so when I started in carnivore, I was still tracked my food because I wanted to know what I was doing, but I just ate whatever I wanted. I ate as much steak, fatty ribeyes, ground meat, big old omelets, and I dropped a little bit of weight, and I was able to maintain leanness effortlessly. But all of the negative effects of being keto hit you like, you know, what they call it, the keto flu. They hit you like right away. Some of that stuff hit like within the first week, your lack of ability to sleep is just crazy. And this is why keto people, carnivore people, they take so many electrolytes. I had to take so much magnesium just to go to sleep. I was drinking, God knows, like 5 elements a day, element packets putting in my water. I was weighing and measuring my salt to make sure I put enough on my meat throughout the day. And, you know, it's like, that is not a natural diet. A lot of carnivore people think, well, this is a eating meat that's supernatural. It's like, yeah, but constructing your entire diet around only eating meat and which requires all this, um, calling this a natural diet anymore. Um, I felt really the main reason why I got into carnivore was because I've always had some digestive issues since I was really young. Child that was just regularly constant. And I think about how much like stress that added to my life because that's just what my norm was. And so when I got into tons of food at one time, you know, you experience all this bloating and what. And when I went to carnivore, my bloating went away like instantly. And there's this, you know, until all the other stress hormones catch up, when your serotonin drops down because of all the gut inflammation is absent, there's this like euphoric, almost like religious nirvana. You're like, oh, I'm at peace. I can think clearly. Um, and that was this like wonderful, wonderful period of time, like this kind of little honeymoon experience that nothing I've ever done has quite replicated. Um, but I could only do that for so long until the lack of carbs started to just become very apparent.
Hmm.
Because, you know, if, as you, someone who's done keto, I know you said you were sniffing biscuits, which I think is crazy. But I have never had insane cravings like that in my entire life
Hmm.
to the point where I had like a total mental breakdown one day and I ended up eating like 8,000 calories. And my stomach was like a bottomless pit. I started going through all the cabinets in my house. I ate a whole pack, every almond in this huge bag of raw almonds. I started grabbing, yogurt because there's some carbohydrates in yogurt, and I found a
Mhm.
little bit of chocolate, and I ate like all of that, and I was like, that's not enough.
Yeah.
I had to drive to the store, and I it got cookie dough and ice cream, or just whatever I could get my hands on. And it was, if you when you talk to people who are more on the science side of things, who study, um, the metabolism, your body will actually feel like the stomach is endless if when you need to do that. Like in some cases where you might bloat otherwise or have any digestive discomfort, it was like my body could handle no matter what I needed. I basically ate and ate and ate until I passed out.
Mhm.
That
Mhm. Mhm.
performance was significantly lower. The amount of weight I could lift, the amount of reps I could do. And so after about 3 or so months, with those cheating, but every once in a while, I started adding in raw goat milk and honey that I would do like every day, where I would have like 150 grams of carbs, all from sugar if it's milk and honey. And all of a sudden, I was like, okay, now I can I don't have these crazy cravings anymore. My gut was at peace, but now my general metabolism feels like it's at peace too. But even at, about 3 months of that, my body felt like it needed more substantial carbohydrate, and my craving for starch went way up. And I started going to this local bakery, which all organic, all natural ingredients, makes his brioche buns. It's just flour, milk, eggs, and sugar. I would eat a whole bag of those every day, still eating like my carnivore diet, fatty meats, ribeyes, ground meat, eggs, raw milk, honey, started eating some berries. And I was training like 3 times a day. I would do like a strongman session in the morning. And then at night, I would do jujitsu, go home and slam some milk, honey, and bread, and then go straight to Gold's Gym in Venice and do bodybuilding. Um, and there's something I think that the carnivore period did with I'm assuming the keto effects of it, which it felt like it almost reset my metabolism. I've talked to Peters. I can't find a low carb diet would improve your metabolism, but I wasn't worrying about any Randall cycle issues. I was eating fat and carbs at the same time. I was not having to go low fat. I was not having to go low carb. I was not having to go low protein. But it kind of synergized into like what just seems like a normal, maybe traditional diet: meat, eggs, dairy, fruit, and starch.
No. And that, and that's
No problems.
and that's the thing that everybody should be able to eat if we didn't have like whatever psychopaths have done to our food system or whatever's going on, something's not right because, our ancestors, let's just go back recently, living in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, they could eat a mixed plate like every human wants to eat. Every human wants a little butter on their potato, right? If they're in a steak with a little bit of maybe a little bit of fat on it and like that's natural to eat that, and not have to feel like, well, you have to be perpetually removing one of those three macros. It's like you have to create this artificial perpetual diet hunt for the holy grail of dieting to just try to maintain what seemed rather effortless for past generations of our ancestors in America, where they had, like Ray was telling us, when I interviewed him with Brad Marshall, he was talking about how he would eat what he counted as 9,000 calories a day, and he said he was
Yeah,
doing, I
and
said,
Ray was not a big guy.
yeah, and he said he was just walking around planting trees for the Department of Forestry, and he was eating, a big, massive breakfast with plates of pancakes and everything. And people, it's not about, like pigging out, but it seems like Americans should be able to, or just any human, but just talking about our context, should be able to eat a mixed macro plate and not be completely effed up from it. But that's not seemingly the case for like people. And the question is why. And of course, you could go on the who done it, detective hunt. It's the PUFA, it's the seed oils, it's the frying of the seed oils. It's the corn syrup. It's the lecithin. It's the gums. It's the EMF. It's the Wi-Fi, the pesticides, every blah, blah, blah. Well, who knows at this point? It's all a mess, but whatever it is, something has like basically taken the human, because you think about it, what Brad Marshall talks about, you look at the USDA, what they would measure, and they were measuring like 4,000, like almost 4,000 calories consumed by the average American in the 1940s, and they were measuring it by what they were purchasing per household, 4,003 to 4,000 calories a day for the every American person, individual. And they were eating a mixed macro plate, and they weren't hitting the gym so hard. They weren't all bodybuilders, and they weren't plowing the fields in the 1950s all the time. They were going into a train and going to an office job and sitting, at the TV and listening to the radio or whatever. They were sedentary too. But something poisoned us. And now it's like people are eating on
Yeah, I
average
mean,
half that caloric intake, but they're massively sick and obese and diseased. Crazy.
yeah, it's whenever people, just try to say, oh, well, you just need to like cut your calories, you're eating too much. It's like, we're not actually solving the problem here. And even when you say, okay, well, it's the PUFA, what you're what you're talking about is we need to address the organism, and any individual organism. It's like we have to figure out what it is about the individual's metabolism that's the problem. And any one of these things could potentially be the one that's causing the issue, or likely it's a combination of all these factors. But yes, I mean, like you were saying, what all those studies showed was that the wealthy people, they just ate more and their metabolism just rose right to it.
Right.
You ate more and you didn't gain weight. And I
And
think
people
there's
can't even
this.
eat 2,000. But the thing is, there's something wrong when people can't even eat half the caloric intake of their ancestors without being sick and low energy and diseased of the mind and body. That's insane. Something's killing us, like something that doesn't like the Homo sapiens species is trying to wipe us off or something. I don't know, something we've made a mistake in doing or something. It's like catastrophic.
Well, they've apparently wildlife is also becoming more obese.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Yeah.
and the ones that still live in the wild and eat the natural diet. So there's this idea of EMF or polluted water
Wait, the wild
and
animals are
air.
getting obese?
Wild animals are on average getting more obese too.
Are they coming in and eating trash from the neighborhoods?
I can't say, so I'm not gonna, confirm any specific. I've just, from people that I've, fellow people on
Good
Twitter,
Lord.
I've seen tweets. I remember one
So,
from,
so Smokey the Bear
um,
can't even get it done anymore, huh? Good
well,
Lord.
Smokey the Bear was probably raiding, some picnic baskets with Yogi
Yeah.
Bear, but the idea is, again, I'm not stating it as fact, but I believe even the wild animals, which purportedly aren't eating any agricultural foods or industrial foods, are still seeing an increase in obesity.
Wow.
Um,
So
but
even the
it's
wild moose are obese. You're saying the wild moose are a bunch of fat asses.
they
God, the
might be. So they're,
bobcats, they can't. What is going on? Goodness.
but there's. Um, I'm always interested in, because the thing that I think was the biggest thing to get over was
Send me
what's
the
the
data on
most.
that wild animal thing. I'm fascinated about that. If you
I
can
will
find
I will
it,
see if I can find the tweet and I'll
yeah, we'll
send it
put
to
it in
you.
the show notes or something if it has any data to
Um,
it.
getting one of the things I think Peating has done is it can get you past the idea of like, well, what's the most natural diet? And we go, well, do you want the most? I mean, it's natural to break your leg and die,
Oh,
or do you want to be the healthiest, most strongest version of yourself? And what I found is when I try to pursue health, my health goes to shit,
mhm.
because health is a very vague concept. How do you? Uh, it's completely subjective. Like, how do you quantify or even qualify health? If I feel good, then you're honestly kind of talking more about performance. Like,
Mhm.
if I'm sleeping well, do I like wake up and have energy throughout the day? Do I instinctually want to play? Do
Mhm.
I instinctually
Yeah.
want to listen to music? Are my workouts good? And so I think what whenever I have followed diets that were with the purpose of health, my health always is a negative result.
Right.
When I pursue performance,
Right.
sometimes you run into trouble, but in general, it always trends
Yeah.
up. And so I'm really excited that, especially within the Pete sphere, not that I'm like a Pete absolutist. I do whatever's interesting to me. I'm not against cult-like behavior. I'm not against religious dogmatic devotion. Which whatever's interesting. Like wherever I'm drawn, I will go to where I feel like there's the value. And so you're seeing people who are inspired by Pete's framework, like anabology's honey diet thing, right? There's this guy like Meathead or something who I've been going back with
Yeah.
in the last like week or so. He is a carnivore guy who said, "I feel like trying the honey diet. This sounds interesting to me." Like out of nowhere, and he been doing it for 2 weeks, and he's like, "This feels really great." And so this is someone who was fully in the keto carnivore perspective, going, if something can make me feel good, let's pull more at this thread and see what it
Hmm.
unravels.
Hmm.
Um,
And
and
I think the
so,
catch is all these extreme, kind of interventions usually remove one or more macros pretty drastically compared to the general free floating. And I'm just saying, generally trying to be healthy, but not really trying to follow a guideline, right? What your body will naturally kind of go to a mixed macro ratio that's more, I think, more balanced. But it seems like the ones that have these big breakthroughs tend to be ones that remove one of those macros dramatically in proportion to the others. And then, like whenever they try to bring that balance back, it seems like a lot of them have a hard time. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, we're doing honey now and sugar. That's great. Low fat. Wow, you can do great on that. And a lot of these guys got to remember they're trying this. I don't know what your age is, but they're trying this in their 20s. Dude, I did keto, which is supposed to
yeah,
be, I did that for years, okay? And I felt amazing on it, okay? And I did the bad keto with all the PUFAs, and I was lean on it as long as I was doing it. So, I mean, I could have written very nice testimonies on, social media in 2006, 7, and 8, whatever, talking about how great keto was. And I promoted carnivore. I never promoted it as you got to do this, but I did. I was around, I had all those guys, Sean Baker, Paul Saladino, before they got big. They were all coming on my show every time. And I was promoting them all their ideas, and Michaela Peterson, Jordan Peterson, all these people were all around the same orbit. And it works insofar the ketogenic diet works as long as you stay in it. The moment you try to, for me at least, try to integrate, to bring back carbohydrates, I know a lot of that's water weight, but it just seems like, it's like your body's like, what the hell is this? Okay, we're going to store this up. I guess we finally reached the land of plenty. We reached Cana. We've been eating deer in the wilderness, and we finally got to the land of plenty. Here we go.
well, so what you're saying, right? It's these solutions are like remove a macronutrient, right?
Right.
And so it seems like if
Like
you want to lose
whack-a-mole.
weight,
Uh,
right? Yeah, and you it's one of the
yeah.
so you either have two options. You have remove a macronutrient, and it's almost every diet is the energy macronutrient, so fat or carbs, right? Very, you're seeing some people talk about removing protein, but let's just, regardless, you remove a macronutrient and then just kind of eat whatever you want. Let your cravings and your metabolism otherwise drive your
Yeah.
consumption, or you can do what bodybuilders have always done: is you eat a mixed diet and you control the caloric expenditure, which means you ignore your cravings. You force the your body, right, as opposed to listening to your body. So if your body says I'm hungry, you say tough shit. We've already hit our 3,000 calories for the
Okay.
day, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, or it's like I'm full, but I'm trying to bulk. You got to eat more.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that I mean, not that I'm necessarily into astrology, but I am a Gemini, and so I tend to find myself loving balance. I
Yeah. Me
kind of
too.
like
Yeah.
I like to play devil's advocate. I like
Yeah.
to sort of see where
Yeah.
these things kind of fit together.
Right.
Um, And I think that similar to, um, I think there's value to carbs. I think there's value to fat. I think there's value to being able to listen to your body. And I think there's value to being able to impart your will on yourself. Because your will, your body and mind and soul are not separate in my mind, at least. It's you're one cohesive unit. And so all of these parts of you are part of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And you forcing yourself to do something is still natural.
Mm-hmm.
You using stress metabolism to do something is still, it's there because your body needs to be able to access it if it needs to be able to access it. Even if it's an emergency stress reaction, it all needs to fit together to actually be a natural, you know, living organism, to be a true
Mm-hmm.
being.
Yeah.
And so I think, I've seen people lose incredible amounts of weight very quickly and effectively with these remove a macronutrient thing. The problem with that is, then what? Like you said, I've worked as long as I was keto. Now, from what I was doing before with my performance oriented diet, where because I had this sort of idea that carbs were bad, even if that was the wrong framework, what I was doing in practice was you should still have days without carbs. You should still have keto days because some days you don't have a successful hunt, but
Yeah.
some days you have a successful hunt, but you don't find any
Yeah.
forage. And,
Isn't that,
and
didn't
some
they,
days you don't have anything at all.
don't they do that in bodybuilding circles, carb cycling and carb loading?
Yeah. So, I was always drawn to this um, cyclical diet. One day high carb, one day low carb, or carb backloading. So you're keto all day and you eat your carbs at night. And when you eat, or a cyclical ketogenic diet, which the most popular ones were called the metabolic diet or the anabolic diet by Mauro Di Pasquale. He was a bodybuilder. And the idea was you eat keto all week and then you carb up on the weekends. There's so many diets like this. And obviously, there's some mechanism to it, there's a truth to it, regardless of how it works. There's something to that that leads people to be able to
Right.
maintain a lean body type.
Right.
And I think if you can be really strict one way or the other and go back and forth so that you don't ever actually go through these extended periods of time where, oh, well, now I've been eating too low fat for a long time. My cholesterol is too low. My vitamin A is too low, which, I've seen happen to many Peters. I think I experienced something myself too, where you're eating like 10% or less grams of fat a day and you're taking thyroid. And then all of a sudden, all of your sources of cholesterol and vitamin A are gone because you're not eating eggs and you're not eating butter and milk and stuff. Um, I think this is a great solution. And so the thing I like about something like carb backloading or the honey diet or cyclical ketogenic diet is you break up meals or days or parts of the day or weeks into high carb, low fat, high carb. And I do think that if you do that for an extended period of time and you give yourself metabolic flexibility, you are getting the benefits without the negatives.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where my mind's at right now. I feel like for the first time in a long time I have, because for a while I was doing, I did the thing where I gained a bunch of weight where I started peating, but I will give the caveat that I came into peating because I had like a near death experience. Um, After that year of carnivore that I described, doing 6 months of strict carnivore, 3 months of milk and honey, then 3 months of a balance, fruit and starch. I got into the Aajonus Planets Primal. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Okay. So Kyle Mamunas has experience with that. I've heard him talk about it. I think Danny Roddy did too. This is like the raw meat diet.
Okay. Oh God. You ate some raw raccoon or something?
No,
You said you had a
I
near
don't.
death experience. Were you?
Yeah, but I think what was happening was I was having. So just to give you and your listeners kind of an idea of what the diet is, it is a totally raw diet that includes meat, eggs, dairy, fruit, honey, stuff like that. So it's not, no plant foods. It's not no meat foods. It's kind of like raw veganism meets carnivore kind of a thing. And the reason why, like I mentioned, I had issues with digestion, which is what drew me to carnivore.
Hmm.
I've always liked raw meat. I've been eating raw meat since I was a kid. I always liked tartare and sushi and stuff like that. When I was carnivore, I was hot a lot. I don't know if that was because I was experiencing an heightened stress metabolism, because 2020 was during COVID and I was doing jujitsu at an underground gym that was running illegally. And so you had to use the thermometer gun, just like, hey, we're going to open, but just make sure you don't have a fever. And looking back, my temps were all like 96, 97 at like 5, 6 p.m., which is pretty low. And but I was living, by the beach, and I didn't have air conditioning, and cooking all this steak in my house on the carnivore diet. I just felt like so hot. So a lot of times I'd be like, I don't even feel like cooking. I'm just going to eat this steak raw. And I always noticed that when I ate my meals raw, my my digestion was flawless, no bloat. I felt like super empty and flat, more so than even normal from carnivore. And so I started hearing more about this. I was hearing more about Pete and Primal at the same time on Instagram at the time. And kind of for me, Primal won out because I always have this like instinctual, like return to nature, primal caveman mindset
Yeah.
for whatever reason. Um, but the thing about the diet is two parts. One is that Aajonus, the guy who designed the diet, uh, advocates for you getting fat because the fat creates more protection from toxicity. The whole diet's about detoxing. So the more raw fat you have on your body from saturated fat, the more place you have to protect your body from all the toxicity of vaccines and EMFs and everything that you could possibly think of. So I went from being very, very lean, very vascular to like fat in a span of like 2 weeks because I would eat like a quart of ice cream every day, drink raw milk, eat sticks of butter. I got fat like right away, which in retrospect was very, very stupid. But I was like totally bought into the diet. But the other thing about the diet is that it tells you not to eat any salt. So it's a no salt diet. And I started to get kind of just generally nauseous over time. And I think that is without the chloride from the sodium chloride, my stomach acid was getting weaker to produce hydrochloric acid. I think eating all these cold foods because they were coming out of the fridge and then not being
What about
cooked.
parasites? Did you get parasites maybe?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's possible.
Yeah.
But the whole thing with he has a whole framework about the viruses and bacteria and
Yeah.
parasites, and that it's all good. It's all good, man. Like it's all natural. It only works to detox you. They only eat dead tissue. Like I said, I fully bought into it. No matter how crazy it was, I tried it. And about 9, 10 months into it, I had been nauseous for weeks where it was like I couldn't stomach a meal. I couldn't stomach meat. I could only stomach like some fruit and milk and whatnot. Um, I
And
started to get some
that's
like,
when you know you've got a whack internet diet when you're nauseous for weeks, man, and
yeah.
you're not
Well,
sick.
dude, and that's the thing. It's
Yeah.
like because I dealt with it and I went to the extremes of it because that's kind of my personality
Yeah.
type. I'm like, so I just try to tell people like I personally don't think there's anything unsafe about raw meat inherently. And I don't claim that it's the raw meat that did anything. I'm just saying just don't do this diet. Knowing what I know now, of course, through the experience, but also like I think the lack of salt is one of the worst parts of it.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, after kind of just having really low appetite for weeks and not being able to stomach food, um, I got like some like flu-like symptoms. Within a span of like a week, I got like hundreds of mosquito bites. I
Mm.
was like, I was at like a friend's property that he had lived at a swamp on his property. We like were by the fire pit. I got like hundreds and hundreds of mosquito bites all over my body. And then a few days later, maybe once the mosquito bites started to like go out, wear off the body, I
Hmm.
started having these other spots, which I might have been like chicken pox.
Gosh.
Then I really bad flu-like symptoms,
You had the 12
and
plagues of Egypt, or didn't you? The 10
yeah,
plagues of Egypt. Goodness.
so yeah, then I had really bad flu-like symptoms, and I was kind of delirious. Um, I felt I was like I can remember it all now perfectly,
And while you were
but
delirious, you were still chewing on that raw meat and drinking
I
honey?
was because I thought that's what
Yeah.
that's what I'm supposed to do. Um, and I was so sick it was coming out of both ends like it had never before.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I ended up getting meningitis.
Mm.
So, for people that don't know, meningitis is an inflammation of the brain. There's bacterial meningitis and there's viral meningitis. Bacterial meningitis is like fatal, like 95% of the time. So I guess I had viral meningitis. But the swelling of the meninges is the lining of the brain.
Uh-huh.
I was like dumb and kind of drunk, but totally aware it was what was going on in my surroundings, but
Wow.
totally incapable of acting like I wanted to. Um, and I was so sick. I was basically fully bedridden eventually for like 2 weeks. Um, well, I was like practically like in that unconscious state for 2 weeks, more or less bedridden for 2 months. And I finally kind of like snapped out of my primal
Yeah.
thing. And I ate basically one meal twice a day, every day for weeks. And I had oxtail soup and a big bowl of salted buttered white rice. And
So you
I
didn't
just
have a
wanted
near,
all of
so you said you had a near death experience, not an
I,
NDE. You didn't have an NDE.
oh, well, I mean, I almost died from the illness. I guess I
I'm
didn't like
saying, did you have like a
almost.
vision thing? I thought you said you had like a vision thing. You just meant you
Oh no,
almost died.
I mean, like, yeah, I almost died.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought you meant like you had like a near death experience where like Ray Peat came out and said, "Have you tried the carrot salad, my friend?"
No,
Like
no.
Splinter
I
from
mean,
Ninja Turtles. Remember when he'd come in like a blue hologram? You
yeah,
know, it
just
wasn't
like
like it
Like
wasn't
Obi Wan and Yoda.
you didn't have a vision. You had literally just dying without the vision.
Yeah, well,
Ugh.
in a sense, it was a very strong wake up call.
Yeah.
And so when I went to the doctor, now this was during COVID, and I did not want to get vaccinated no matter what, and so
God, they were
you
trying to
know,
force the vaccine on you while you were sick. Goodness.
well, so I didn't go to the hospital. That's the thing. So
You did or did
my
not? I didn't hear
I
you.
did not. I did
Okay.
not. My fiance, just God bless her, she took such good care of me, and she called a naturopath who would saw me in her parking lot of her office and came and took my blood. Um, and so I had hyponatremia. If you're familiar with that, it's a severe sodium electrolyte deficiency.
Okay.
Hyponatremia is what people get when they drink too much water in excessive heat and don't
Wow.
replenish their.
Wow.
It's like if you're a football player during like two a days
Yeah.
in the South,
Yeah.
you have to drink Gatorade. If you drink
Yeah.
water, like football players die because they
Yeah.
don't drink enough Gatorade. Um, so I had hyponatremia. No shit, I didn't eat salt for almost a year. And but otherwise, my white blood cell count had already come down, so I'd already kind of like dealt through the worst of the viral whatever was going on, and I just needed like nourishment after eating all this cold food. That's like I love raw foods, but like that is not if that's your whole diet. There's no sense of like nourishment. There's no
Mhm.
warmth. I just wanted soup. I wanted these like gelatinous meats, the oxtail.
Mhm.
I wanted starch. I wanted salt, and I basically switched gears. In my head, it had already been like the year previous. It was like it's a primal peat combination. That's the truth. And then it was like the peat sort of just kind of subsumed the primal aspect of it. Um, so I'd already gained weight from the fat I put on from Primal, and then I had sort of like I was bedridden, I was losing muscle, I was not really eating so much, and so then in order to like recover from my illness, I started just. I mean, I was certainly not going to like put a stopper on my appetite, but I went right into that after like basically 2.5 months from the day that I first got sick with the meningitis, I I moved to a farm and started working like full time doing like farm labor
Hmm.
in the middle of winter in Colorado. So I put a lot of strain on my body, um, and I was certainly not going to hold back on any calories whatsoever. And so I inevitably, gained a bunch of weight. But I don't think if I had come to Peating from a healthy place, I don't think I would have gained weight like a lot of people say that they do. But then again, there's people come to Peating because they're at their end. It's like the normal stuff, the conventional stuff doesn't really work.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think there's one, people should recognize the people who come to Peating, what draws people to Peating, and then think about what actually there are. So if you've ever seen, I don't know if you had them on your podcast, Mike Fave or Jay Feldman, they were like two college buddies who've
Hmm.
branched off. They each have their own podcast about bioenergetic stuff. They came into it from being healthy, fit college kids,
Hmm.
and they gained a little bit of weight, and then they,
Hmm.
figured out how to like not eat a pint of ice cream every single night for, after
Hmm.
dinner.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a fascinating journey. I mean, the goal is really to just try to get people to be able to eat a normal plate of food without being sick, for God's sake. You know what I mean? That's the problem with these diets, is like, we've got to get, and it's got to be scalable. We cannot have something, and I know this sounds, I understand people, do it, but if you got millions and millions of sick people right now, that are, this whole society is going to collapse, right? When they all get on Ozempic with welfare supporting it, with Medicaid
Yeah,
and Medicare. Oh my, I
we
mean,
are creating
yeah,
more sick people every day,
it's going to be catastrophic.
and
And if you go to the healthcare systems now, it's worse than the customer service of these people, especially when you're older. When you go to these like rehab centers, it's got like, it's the same quality customer service as a drive-through restaurant now,
yeah, and
and in terms
the
of like,
problem is that
you know,
we can't trust our medical system.
yeah,
The system that is supposed to be there for our
yeah,
health. I think most of us
predatorial,
agree
yeah.
actively harm our health.
You
And
go in there for yeah, you go in there because you're a little bit dry mouth and you're intubated for weeks on a
yeah,
ventilator. I mean, good
I
Lord, you
mean,
just needed a little bit, you need a cup of water, not a ventilation, you know?
yeah. My father passed away earlier this year,
I'm sorry to
and
hear that.
he was almost 91, so he lived
Yeah,
a wonderful long life.
yeah,
But he had Parkinson's towards the end of his life, and he was on statins as long as I
yeah,
can remember. And I mean, there's all this data about statins causing dementia and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Um, and it's he just trusted that his doctor knew, and I knew from I had sort of been at least on like the hey, fat's not bad for you, cholesterol's not bad for you
yeah,
thing pretty early on from the paleo stuff, and even before then. But I couldn't convince him other. Luckily, I got my mom to get off
yeah,
of statins.
yeah,
But I firmly believe that the medical system gave my father Parkinson's, which is such a horrible, horrible way to go. To completely, by the end of it, he did not know who I was.
yeah,
And I pray no one ever has to experience such a
yeah,
thing. But it's like this wasn't necessary. This didn't have to happen.
yeah,
And the one thing I will say that I think is really important about, especially for people who are into alternative health and who are fed up with the system, why I think Pete is such an important figure in this is that his work and the people that he was inspired by show that science and medicine aren't inherently bad. We had developed all these thyroid and aspirin and all these wonderful things before everything kind of got captured by God knows what, around the 50s and 60s, where it flipped everything away from real methodology, real interventions that worked, that made people healthier. And instead of this like return to, you know, no technology, return to caveman, all these different various I don't really like the word like regressive, but a lot of people who consider themselves like right leaning or alternative, everything has to be in the past, but like the future has to be ahead of us. You know,
Yeah.
all these
Yeah.
incredible discoveries
Yeah.
by Ray's work, by Otto Warburg and Hans Selye, like all these incredible people. I hope that there's this, you know, it doesn't have to be like this. There is a future where our human ingenuity
Mhm.
improves our station in life, that improves our circumstances, and you know, things aren't off the table just because they look like what we consider to be medicine now. We
Yeah.
have to be coming up with technological advancements to, first off, undo the damage of, you know, if you're getting all this endocrine disruption and xenoestrogens from your water and from your air and
Yeah.
from your food, you think you're like, oh, I'm going to just eat some liver and I'm going to solve all the problems like that. It's like, no, you might need some technology, you might need some pharmaceutical, you know, but the good versions of them, the versions that haven't been adulterated, that haven't been, you know, um, kind of made to then make us worse as opposed to better.
Do you use CO2 at all, or have you looked into that? High
Um,
altitude. You lived in Colorado. Did you go to 8,000 feet or anything?
so when I lived in Colorado, I lived around 5,000 feet,
Okay.
and I will say that my health was worse in Colorado than it is now that I'm back home in Southern California.
Hmm.
Um, I think the sun and the warm weather year round makes a big difference. Um, for as far as CO2 goes, in order to increase it, I drink a lot of sparkling water. I take baking soda from time to time. You know, eating more
You
carbohydrates so the
use
body
baking
is.
soda as a pre-workout or post-workout or anything?
Yeah, I've used it as a pre-workout and found like I got good results. I'll use it before bed.
What's better,
Um,
creatine or baking soda?
oh, well, I wouldn't create any separation between the two. I take both.
Yeah.
You know, creatine is not a pre-workout type of
Okay.
substance. Creatine, you know how people talk about loading creatine in your system?
Yeah.
You don't get the effects of creatine when you take it. You
Okay.
get it when it's saturated in the body.
Okay.
So you can theoretically take creatine at any time of the day, and you have the effects of it just because it's in your system of a certain extent. So it's put in pre-workouts because that's when people take their workout spectrum. Um, but no, I'm a big fan of creatine. I take creatine. You know, it's supposed to increase your DHT. It increase. You know, it's kind of thought of as like a mental supplement too. Like they say, give it to your grandma. You know, give it to whoever needs a better functioning brain.
Yeah.
Um, and but yeah, I think like a pre-workout, I take salt, um, baking soda, and sugar. I always like try to combine. I always make sure I have salt and sugar before a workout. Um, but baking soda is a great addition to the pre-workout. And you know, like I was saying like before about the performance mindset, I think it's good for people to think of themselves as, you don't have to think of yourself like an athlete, but you are a human performing in the world. You want to be happier, you want to be more energetic, you want to be smarter, you want to be more creative. Your life is performance. You know, we understand that animals live that live in nature are sort of, they're basically competing for their survival all the
Yeah.
time. And they have to be athletes 24/7. If you're prey, you have to be able to run away. If you're a predator, you have to be able to chase down. I think, I know, again, I've always been a fitness minded person, but health is performance,
Yeah.
and eating foods for this, like, and that's what Primal was. It was this purity. It was a very religious thing.
Mhm.
The people in the Primal, I made some good friends in the group chats and stuff, but they have this like absurd purity religious, where, you know, if you eat a cooked food, like you're just a complete moron, right? But I've never met someone who actually gets good results from it. Like, are you healthy? Are you smarter? Um, are you are you dealing with whatever issues you're having?
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm very much kind of shifting more towards, um, I'm trying to get more back in the gym. Like my health took a serious hit when I got sick and I was bedridden. And then when I was working on the farm, it's been really tough being a lifelong athlete and then being like, I'm not really in such great shape anymore. You know, I mean, I might have a decent amount of muscle still and, you know, pretty lean, not like super lean as I was anymore, but
Well,
as
you
they
got
were
to have a
before.
goal. I think that's the best thing. I don't like I get it for health purposes or whatever, but I don't like the gym culture if it's not for a goal, like outside of it. If you want to compete in powerlifting or bodybuilding or you want to, perform at a high level or you need to be in a movie play or you need to, do something really intense. Like it's really good to have goals beyond just sitting and looking at yourself in the mirror. And I don't like that gym culture because I think it becomes in and of itself this kind of, especially, like today's version of it where it feminizes men's value of themselves, where they believe their self-worth is like determined by how, like a vain beauty concept, right? As opposed
Right.
to that's not even the attributes that women have ever really at their primal self really prioritize typically and when they select for a mate. And yet so many men are just killing themselves doing things unhealthy and extreme dieting and extreme amounts of just like wrapping their whole self concept over trying to chase such small percentage of body fat or whatever, which their ancestors would laugh at them, like, son, go do
Well,
something with your life. What are you
you know,
doing? You're sitting there. Are you gonna go wrestle some? What you gonna do with this? You spend your whole life there. You got 1% body fat. Get on with your life. Like a lot of our ancestors. I don't even know what accent that was because mine were German and Polish and stuff. But so they wouldn't even sound like that. But it's like, it's like do something with that. If you need to train for it and then do something with it. You need to be on, whatever.
well, that goes back to kind of what I was saying before. Is I think we've only really been on this wrong path for a relatively short period of time.
Yeah.
Um, body. First off, if you take bodybuilding by itself, bodybuilding today is not beautiful. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
These they call them like mass monsters.
Yeah.
They've gone beyond the actual. There's no, like, the vanity is gone. It's not. It's just. It's masochism.
Yeah.
It's 1% body fat isn't attractive.
Yeah.
These insane tumors,
Mm.
cosplaying as muscles. This gritty appearance, this excessive vascularity. I would rather look like a regular person than look like that.
Yeah.
But bodybuilders before, yes, look, this is even with the advent of steroids. I think, just like from the Pete perspective, some medications, some medicines and pharmaceuticals are healthy. Just like Peter's experiment with various hormones and supplements, I think probably steroids in some sense could be part of the evolution of man and maybe their original states or with a proper balance of the other hormones.
Mhm.
These bodies were not only that they were beautiful, but the people who got into bodybuilding were athletes.
Mm.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was an Olympic weightlifter and a powerlifter. Franco Columbu was a boxer and a strongman. Franco Columbu, who was only like 5'6",
Yeah.
5'5", like 170 pounds, competed at World's Strongest Man. You have any idea how strong you have
Yeah.
to be up for World's Strongest Man, weighing under 200 pounds?
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy.
Right.
So are you familiar with refinement culture?
No, what's that?
The concept. I don't know who came up with it. I know that there's a guy on Twitter named Lindy Man who's like talked about it
Okay.
on a
Yeah.
long enough time
Yeah.
scale. People start. Everything is just a maximal efficiency at the cost of everything else.
Hmm.
And so, if judges in bodybuilding, for instance, just reward size of muscularity and low levels
Hmm.
of body fat,
Hmm.
then the only values at that point are size of muscularity and low levels of body fat.
Yeah, it's like capture.
Forgetting
We
the
call that like capture of hypermimetic competition, where you're constantly in this escalatory reciprocal competition over a kind of narrow frame of values that you're trying to compete over. You know what I mean? And it
Yeah,
becomes
you're
yeah,
outsmarting the paradigm.
yeah,
Going back to that coach I had, who I said was a total genius. Most strongman coaches like don't quote like Heidegger and Nietzsche and stuff,
yeah,
but like he would regularly talk about that. Um, he always talked about Goodhart's law like all the time, which is, once a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. And so people start maximizing for the measure and not the
Mhm.
target.
Mhm.
And so what something it has to be a big cultural shift. Um, but there's a reason why the rules always change, because it's a natural inclination to always start to like, oh, this can
Mhm.
be a little bit more efficient. You don't realize what you're losing until it's gone too far.
Mhm.
Um, Personally, I think that people should be beautiful. I think that health and beauty are one and the same. And when you look at these bodybuilders who have the distended bellies, they're
Mhm.
bloated.
Mhm.
That's ugly. If you look at their posture,
Mhm.
if you look at their gait cycle, they
Mhm.
waddle around.
Mhm.
The beauty's gone. There
Yeah.
used to be a grace to it. If you even look at athletes who play real sports, um, like a Michael Jordan moved very fluidly. Kobe moved very fluidly. There was a grace and elegance to their movement. LeBron James, who now has a longer career than anyone else, more points than anyone else. He's 40 something. He's still dominating the league. He has a very choppy gait pattern. He has this
Yeah.
kind of duck-footed thing. And look, I'm not taking anything away from his abilities to get the job done on the court, but we everything should still be beautiful. Our architecture should be beautiful. Our food should be everything should still be beautiful, or you're losing
Yeah.
the true value in it. And so, as an athlete, I consider myself an athlete. I will always consider myself an athlete.
Mhm.
I think that focusing on strength at the sacrifice of like athleticism is bad. I think focusing on body composition at the sacrifice of overall health. Look, you can be healthy and be somewhere between 8 to 15% body fat, and you can push it a little bit lean or whatever. But like you know, people justified being overweight as being healthy too. I was seeing from this primal perspective. There's a lot of things that people convince themselves of, but at the end of the day, if it looks good, actually looks good, if you have an eye for what looks good, if the body moves fluidly through space, like there's I think martial arts are great, especially like boxing and kickboxing, because you're on your feet and it requires this.
Mhm.
You're kind of this guy used to train with said if you can't dance, you can't fight, right? Like you could be big and strong. And like when I got into jujitsu, I was just naturally good at it because of my
Mhm.
strength.
Mhm.
Um, and you can overpower yourself through quite a bit, but the people with the technique, you, more often than not, within a certain realm of body size, they're still gonna beat you. And so it's like actually get better as opposed to being like convincing yourself that this one metric is better.
Yeah.
And just like uh, um, seeing the gait like the standing posture, the
Mhm.
movement posture, the gait, the bone structure, the in bodybuilding they call it like the symmetry.
Mhm.
The body should look pleasant.
Mhm.
And that's the thing. It's like with certain diets, like what's so interesting with things like peating, because you're experimenting so much and you kind of affect your hormones differently.
Mhm.
I found that if I'm doing certain things, my face holds less water and fat, even if my general body fat's low. And so you see these people with uh, ripped six packs who are like 6% body fat, and they have a chubby face, and it's like, do you realize that you're having a hormonal issue? You have excess estrogen and cortisol, and your body's holding face, and I'm sorry, your face is holding like fat and water. And it's like if bodybuilding is about vanity and beauty, you've totally like missed the mark.
Mhm.
And the evaluation of what is healthy, I think, is the definition of what is healthy. I think is kind of this thing that really we're at this really unique point that I think peating is a vital part of.
Mhm.
Like you said, the masculine meat and like the feminine, like carbs and fruit sort of thing, the hunter and the gatherer.
Mhm.
All of these health paradigms have like done one or the other, or like this weird constrained bodybuilding, really like weird, very plain diet.
But I think,
Peating,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, peating sort of promotes this like really delicious
Yeah.
combination of foods
Yeah.
with but telling you like what the healthy versions of them are, right? It gives you a framework to realize, no, 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 we can have it. We can have it all.
Yeah.
If it's done properly, we can get ourselves back to this
Yeah.
healthy standpoint and not eat the junk, but eat like, yeah, eat bread and butter
Yeah.
and eat
I think having
caviar
that
and eat.
having that winning kind of abundant mindset is the most important part of it all, because look at, again, take aside the politics and all that stuff. I mean, I do that on other programs that I do, but Donald Trump, okay, this is a guy who's what, 78,
Yeah.
and he's what, 6'2", and he's been overweight most of his older life from his like 50s and so forth. I guess he's wrestled with it. And he eats fish fillets at McDonald's and KFC with the fork and knife, and he eats the all that stuff. And he never let him get to Chris Christie size, but he's always had weight. And he has, and you couldn't think of something about it. He needs to be a big man, and his energy with his diet and all the stress he's going to, if he didn't have that mindset, I think he would look a lot worse, and he would be a lot sicker and a lot mentally not able to do what he's doing. But, you look at a little Marco Rubio, he couldn't do this. Ted Cruz couldn't do this. Jeb Bush, he's tall and he couldn't do this. George W. Bush couldn't do this. Like, I'm not talking about their philosophy. I'm just looking at the measure of these people. Less body fat than Trump, less unhealthy, probably less, a better healthy diet than Trump. But what's the difference? It's his energy, it's his charisma, it's his mindset, or maybe it's genetics.
Well,
Whatever.
but
Maybe it's all
again,
of it.
it's
Yeah.
whatever it is it overcomes it all, right?
Right. It's the mindset.
There,
Yeah.
it comes back to the performance.
The
I'm
willpower. Right.
always I'm
Yeah.
always blown away by the willpower and the energy.
Yeah.
The guy has been through hell. They've tried to kill him. They've tried to
Yeah.
put him in jail,
You look at, yeah,
and
look at Barack Obama. He's aged worse than Trump.
he looks terrible. He
He
looks
looks,
terrible.
yeah, and he's
And
angry and catty, and he doesn't have his zest anymore, and he's like
so
half his age.
and this is why
Pathetic.
I'm really really big on whatever works.
Yeah.
Like, because do you want to be
I bet
healthy or
Obama
not?
eats healthier. I bet I
Oh
would
yeah,
wager to say he probably might eat even more Peaty than Trump.
I
He'll,
bet you he eats low saturated fat.
yeah. But
Um,
he's eating lots of fruits, and he's eating his little,
yeah, he
he's
probably
hanging
eats
out
more
with,
carbs.
Richard Branson and those types, so he's eating a lot of fancy foods and a lot of fine dining. And Trump's ordering, these filet o fishes in his air, loaded with PUFA, loaded with fries, out, these horrible things. And yet he's got the energy, he's got the mind, he's got the quick comeback like he's 30, like he's 20. So if you have
Yeah,
a will, there's a way. And that really, we need people to believe in themselves and have a will, and not believe themselves in a delusional sense. Know your role, find your role. You can't all be Trump. But the point is like, he's an example of when you have a goal and you have a winner's mindset and you have an abundant mindset where you're not petty and you don't hold on to your grudges and stuff. You can do it right.
yeah. And I mean, look, that's why I say, like, I don't separate the mind, the body, and the
Yeah.
soul. Like, he has whatever it is,
Yeah.
a combination of all of the spirit and the genetics and the, but he's getting the performance done. He has the energy.
Yeah.
He's getting the results.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like the dogma. I'd rather people be dogmatic on the results than on
Right.
the practice, right? Um, Eating a food that is maybe less than ideal is might still be the right decision to make.
Right.
And it's like, for instance, like my mom is getting up there in age, and and she likes to drink a glass of wine every night. I'm like, she has more energy than most 20-year-olds I know. And I'm just like, don't change anything. I could lecture you about your diet all day. What you're
Yeah.
doing is obviously working.
Yeah.
I've never met a single person in the entire world who matches up to her vibrancy and energy. And that's why I just like whatever gets the performance out of you, because, and again, back to the Pete thing, it's about the energy. And I think if Trump ever tried to diet, he'd become unhealthy.
That's what I'm getting at, is that, it's like,
Ray Peat's philosophy was all about the good life and having this vital spirit, this zest for life. And you can't have that zest for life and really follow a diet in the way even many people take his principles and apply them with, measuring every little ounce of this and sprinkling gelatin over everything. I mean, it's fine if you want to do it. I get it, but I do it too sometimes, but it's like it can't be your mindset because it kills the spirit. I mean, I have that kind of energy, that natural vital spirit in me that, after doing what's supposed to be killing my thyroid, or allegedly by the Peat people, I've been doing keto since 2003.
Yeah.
On and off. I'm supposed to have a dead thyroid. Well, guess what? I don't know anybody who does the kind of things what I'm doing, where I'm making music, doing wrestling, doing this, doing that. I've got 20 different shows. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying, like, where does that come from? It's from the will. It's from the drive, from whatever. And youth, sure, whatever. But the point is like, whatever you're doing, you can make mistakes on the mechanisms and eat like stupid keto, maybe, if that's not good to do long term, and still
Well,
have a vital spirit and a creative energy and a winsome childlike wonder for the world, which is what living is about, right? And that's what I'm trying to get
yeah,
at. That's the
yeah, no,
biggest part.
I'm 100% like on board with that, and that's how I feel about it. And it's like I think the how you get there, I always just try to give people like these are various tools.
Yeah.
These are options. Well, try this, try that. But if someone says, "Well, I don't want to eat that," it's like doesn't matter. Don't eat it then.
Yeah.
What you're trying to do is you're trying to get to improve. You're trying to get to that state. You're trying to get to a place where you have more energy. You have the ability to follow through with that. Like a lot of times, people like you can see they kind of have the will, and I've experienced it myself. Where sometimes you're like, I'm not quite bringing my best version to the table.
Right.
Like sometimes I'm relentless and I can deal with anything.
Right.
And other times I just feel like, man, I can barely get out of bed.
Right.
And so it's like, look, a lot of people who, people I respect, people I consider my friends on Twitter who are into Peating, people who've been on your podcast, they go all into the science, and I love that they do that because they do it, and I don't, so I sort of get the benefit of it.
Yeah.
But I'm very much like a bro scientist, and it's I'm just trying to experience it, and that's how I get my learning, and that's why I keep trying new things. That's why I've almost killed myself. But it's like that's why there's that guy X Fat Loss, and he's like I'm like on a pure heavy cream diet, and I have my TSH is like 0. I have a great thyroid, and it's like great. Then you, in that sense, you're peating or whatever, and peating doesn't matter. Are you improving your metabolism? Are you improving the energy of the system?
Right. And that's the thing that I have to that the balance I'm trying to find is like it seems like whether it's extreme carnivore or extreme low fat versions of repeat bioenergetic stuff, when I'm going that extreme thing over time, sometimes I notice that it infects my performance of my creativity or the things that I like to be about me. And then it's like this Faustian bargain. Do you want that? Like if I'm trying to lose weight faster and you're like, or be yourself. And I look at someone like Trump as an inspiration to say, okay, well, maybe we'll take the long path or the longer path with a weight loss goal if it means being yourself and enjoying your life along the way, right? You know what I mean? And having to count and measure every milligram of salt and all that does not seem like the kind of winner strategy that changes the world. Maybe for a time you have to. I understand. There's a season.
Sure.
As the Pentecostals say, there's a season in your life, Well, if there's a season,
there's a reason why we keep time, right? Like, hey, you have to be here in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't care if you don't feel like it. You have to be here.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm trying to explore this cyclical approach with a lot of effort now, because I want to see if I can get the results that I'm looking for from this. Then I can help talk about it and
I'm
give it to other people.
I'm actually ironically trying something similar like that too. I've been trying to do things where it's like, okay, just playing around. I'm hearing what person does over here, what a person does over here. And I've been trying different things. And I found it's interesting. I've had some good experiences where it's like just like eating nothing but, carbohydrates and so forth during the day, and then at the evening just having a nice good meal, just a good hearty
Yeah.
meal, and that's it, and not worrying about it other than that. And it's like I've found that to be interesting and successful. So we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think that's the approach that allows you to um, not have to feel so restrictive and like you're forcing yourself, because just about anybody can say, I would have nothing wrong with only eating fruit for a couple hours.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't feel restrictive. Or if someone said, oh, you can only have a big juicy steak at dinner, but you can have pizza in the morning, it's like, oh yeah, for a meal or so, then yeah, that's not a problem because I know it's the thing that I'm craving or whatever is still there. And so that allows you to actually follow the cravings, where sometimes I'm like, all I want is a big acai bowl right now.
Right.
And then sometimes I'm like, I'm really craving a big fat juicy steak.
Yeah.
And I think like if you separate the days in halves or even in quarters, and you just go, I'm only going to do carb meals or fat meals, and then allow yourself free meals. Do a keto day, do a carb day, do a honey diet where you eat carbs in the morning and fat at night. Do a carb backloading day where you eat fat during the day and carbs at night. Just give yourself this paradigm that like you can give into your actual cravings and desires because those are real.
Right.
Like they exist for a reason, and you can listen to them and just go, all I have to do is just create some base level of separation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can really give people a sense of, I'm not helpless. I have the ability to, not like restrict, but ability to sort of control my approach while giving in at the same time. And, of course, with like, yeah, look, we're talking about Trump getting away with eating McDonald's or something, but make an effort for the quality, understand some of the underlying principles. Don't guzzle soybean oil, and go like all the best foods are available to you. All the most delicious foods are available to you with just some care. And I think that can give people like a lot more, get them out of the learned helplessness. Yeah. Learned helplessness is where I have spent so much of my life, not like in time, but in just depths. Because when it hits, I'm in a black hole.
Yeah.
And I know what works. And this is just living my own life. And this is what everyone has to, I always tell people, you have to figure out what works for you, what kind of approach works for you. Because for me, when I just like, okay, now I have something tangible to like hang on to, my motivation kicks up like crazy. That's just my mindset. And it works for me. So that's what I follow.
Well, Josh, this has been a great discussion. Do you have a website or anything you'd like to share with us?
For now, just Twitter, and I don't really use Instagram anymore, but both handles are at Josh Rayner Gold. I have a podcast myself called Rayner Radio. I haven't recorded in about a year because I moved and I don't quite have a setup yet, and I've kind of been procrastinating that. But yeah, from my social media accounts, you can find everything.
Well, Josh, I appreciate your time, and I'm happy to know you're back. You're on the rebound with your health and everything, and let me know how it goes with your research and experiments. Okay.
I will do, Dave. Thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
You never know. Maybe we'll do something at a big wrestling event one day, huh?
So, the Rainer's coming at you, bro.
Yeah. There's a lot of folks, a lot of wrestling royalty. You said you train in Venice Beach, California, right?
Yeah,
the Gold's Gym.
I used to work out with somewhat regularly, Seth Rollins, and Daniel Bryan. And I forget the girl, Becky Lynch.
Uh-huh.
I really haven't followed wrestling in like.
Did they try to recruit you to their? Did they try?
No, I mean I was just friends with their trainer, and so we would work out together sometimes.
Yeah.
Back when I had long hair and a beard, so actually people used to always call me the Seth Rollins. They thought I looked just like him.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, Josh, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.